Okay, first of all, thanks for inviting me to this beautiful place in Ischia. Sometimes it's very good to get out of your office and get breakfast overseeing the sea. This is really an amazing place. So I don't know whether I fit in this school, but I will try and tell you a few things about a concept that little by little I think is making its place in artificial intelligence, which is the notion of agreement. And what are the techniques that we need to use in order to reach these agreements and in order to check whether we honor or we don't honor these agreements. So I will basically give you the concept of motivation. I think this will not divert you from your interest in semantics. I think this complements quite nicely your interest in semantics. And then I will explain a few methods and applications. I took four that I thought might be interesting. Actually, I took two of them because I have a video, and it is always nice to show a video in a talk, so people kind of relax. The first one is on negotiation. The second and third are on organization. So I will explain why this is important for agreements. The second one has a very tiny part of argumentation, and the last one is on trust. I will try and explain why all these elements are needed. But first of all, a reflection of why agreement computing is important. Well, human relationships have changed, and I think this has happened in a quite recent time span, and we all are aware of that. Even the way we relate with people psychologically has changed. Everything is mediated by information and communication technologies these days. You have a vicinity to your friends that you never had in the past. And there are many examples of this that you all know, email, virtual world games. So the research has changed a bit. I mean, when there is such a dramatic change in the way societies are organized, researchers try to find problems in those areas. And we have witnessed in the last years new human-computer interfaces, new methods to manage networks. We have plenty of new algorithms. The concept of task delegation, the thing that we have these computers and devices next to us made us pass many tasks, delegate tasks for an automatic monitoring of their accomplishment. We want all these devices to include more intelligence, more autonomy. And we are now getting into these cyber-physical systems in which we have all this embedded intelligence into the devices. Okay, there are plenty of calls currently on the topic. And there have been large initiatives in the last 15 years that have focused on this shift of computing. Global computing in Europe, it was a massive number of calls at the beginning of last decade. The semantic web that you, of course, are very aware of has been very, very important with new conferences happening, a lot of funding from Luxembourg. Autonomic computing, there have been also large scale projects and calls in different, in Europe and in the United States. A lot of money has been given into distributed computing, peer-to-peer and grid, just to put two examples, or more recently in smart cities. So all these calls basically focus on the notion of distribution, but mostly on the notion of interaction between people. So there are people using all these systems derived from this research. And here is a reflection why agreement technologies or agreement computing is important, is that although human relationships are very difficult to be understood without the notion of agreement, we agree on many things constantly, every day. We reach agreements to organize meetings like this one, to go to the cinema with your friends. We constantly make agreements, more formal or less formal. We do that. Software rarely incorporates this concept in its operational semantics. It's very strange that when we program to reach agreements with our software and to execute agreements. So it's not part of the operational semantics of our programs, of our systems. So the idea behind agreement technologies and agreement computing is that agreement should become explicit in software engineering so that there should be three effects. The first one is that software may understand better the human interactions. So we want software to somehow be witness of the interactions between humans. The interactions between humans will be, to a large extent, dealing with the creation and the honoring of agreements. So we would like to see agreements explicit in software so that the software understands us. Also because it is a way in which humans can better understand what software is going to do. So humans will generate, or normally generate, expectations in software behavior in the sense that there was a request, there was an agreement, implicit or explicit, to the software so that the software will do something for us. So again, I mean, I may get very upset with my system if it doesn't raise an alarm when something has to happen, because this is something I understood was an agreement between me and the software, that the software will tell me what to do at the appropriate moment. And also interoperability and coordination get simplified. So if we make our software with agreements that are explicit, it will be much easier, or will be somehow natural, that interoperation works, because interoperation will be based on the agreements between the different components that need to interoperate. So in a sense, in agreement computing, the idea is that what software does is, first of all, to compute agreements and accept these agreements between the different components, and then execute those agreements. So computation has this kind of two parts in the process. Okay. So the agreements, yes.
Would call requirements or specifications. Is that wrong, or are you making that distinction there?
I think the requirements could be understood as part of the agreements that a human being, the programmer, is making with the software.
Yes.
So in a sense, yes, requirements engineering is part of the agreement computing.
But your complaint is that the requirements aren't written into the software itself. They're just meta information between the human and the designer. I will not
talk about that, but they could. Because in a sense, I mean, we could understand also software as a norm execution machine. And in a sense, norms or restrictions on the behavior is part of these requirements engineering. So we would like to see software that is aware of the norms, that means which is aware of the requirements that it has to fulfill. Not only that, we would like software to evolve so that these norms change along time, yes, so that the software adapts to the changes that these norms convey. Okay. So in a sense, yes, this is implicit. Okay, so the agreements are of many sorts. I mean, it could be the meaning, and this is very related to this, I would say, summary school. It's a summary school in a sense. I don't know if it is autumn here, but on the meaning of the exchange parameters, I mean, if we need to interoperate two components, I mean, we need them to understand the meaning of the parameters they are going to exchange. So there should be agreements on meaning. And this is what you're going to study in many of your PhDs about semantic alignment. Or norms to respect, which relates to the question that appeared before. I mean, it would be very nice that I tell my assistant what the next norm for him to behave should be. We will say a bit about that in the last of the examples. On the particular protocol to follow. So two components, it would be very nice that they could agree by communicating which is the protocol they are going to use in order to collaborate to solve a problem, and many other kinds. So the challenges for getting these agreements as first, I would say, citizens in computing are in many areas. Semantics, in order to reach agreements on meaning, norms, in order to agree what are the restrictions on the behavior of the software components, and humans. I'm not making a distinction between humans and software components. Organization, so which is the way in which humans and components are going to organize themselves, who will have power over which, who can override decisions made by certain components. Negotiation, which is the most basic, I would say, technique that humans have used for centuries in order to reach agreements about behavior. And finally, trust, because trust somehow is the end of the chain when there are agreements being established between components or between humans. These agreements have to be honored. And trust is the classical sociological mechanism in which you can check whether you can rely on the honor of someone, including a piece of software, to execute their part in a deal, in negotiation. My understanding is that Essence, where you are going to do your PhD, is really a good place to achieve these challenges. Although the main focus is on semantics, I would like to persuade you through a few examples that there are other elements in other areas that could be very interesting and that you could combine with semantics to make perhaps nicer applications, to perhaps more challenging examples. Okay. So this is what I will do next. I will show you a few examples, a few approaches to, in particular, negotiation, organizations, and trust. And of course, I mean, if you have questions, I will be very happy to answer them along the way. Okay, the first one is on negotiation. So negotiation, the literature is very big. These days, there are also competitions where you write your negotiation strategies. The ANAC competition has been happening for the 5 years, and I would say there are hundreds of papers written on negotiations. I will just mention a few words about negotiation, and I will mention a particular challenging problem in negotiation with a few results, just to give you a flavor what the negotiation problems look like. I guess most of you are in that process in which you're working on finding the working hypothesis for your PhD. So I think having these different examples may be refreshing for you. Okay, so what is an agreement between agents? An agreement between agents is basically an agreement in which each agent decides to execute a part of a joint plan, where a plan is a subset of the set of all possible actions that these agents can make. It's part of their capabilities, either being them software or human. So the agreement space is the set of all possible plans. We could agree on anything that we could possibly do. And of course, is the power set of the set of all possible actions is what a concrete deal will be, a member of that power set. Examples of this, very simple one: Alice babysits for Bob, Bob repairs Charlie's computer, and Charlie does the dishes for Alice. So that could be an agreement that 3 agents make. Usually in negotiation, I would say 95% of the research has focused on bilateral negotiation, which is 2 agents negotiating what they do together. But negotiation is much more complex than that. It can be multilateral, and it can be 3 or more agents helping each other. Okay? This has enormous practical applications that nowadays are not solved. Negotiation could help. One is time tabling, and there is, I would say, a lot of money behind this. For instance, school teachers and their schedule. I mean, many of you have probably taught at universities or at schools, and usually when the schedule is given, not everybody is satisfied. And then some people would like to negotiate about exchanging slots. And it's very common that teachers go talk to their friend and say, hey, why don't we swap these 2 particular slots so that because I can go to the swimming pool in the afternoons on Wednesdays. And sometimes they use some private goals and preferences that will not tell to the headmaster because they will be considered not appropriate as the requirements for a teacher. But then they would like to negotiate. And here, negotiations can be bilateral, but can sometimes be multilateral. So you will need perhaps 3 or 4 people in order to find a solution that fixes the current schedule to the better satisfaction of the participants. This is very complex, and usually human beings are so not especially good at finding the best solution they could find. But the software is not helping on that. Current solutions are centralized without negotiation. They do not offer anything. There is no software that does this scheduling from some requirements coming from the different teachers that makes a schedule that allows teachers to refine it through negotiations. Logistics. This is also a very important application domain where you have package delivery, you have multi-track scheduling, you have a number of tracks picking up packages and delivering them. Packages are generated in a dynamic way. Okay, at every minute there is a package that may appear. And again, truck drivers may have private goals and preferences in order to decide which package to take or which package to deliver, depending on the city where they come, the city where they go, and their preferences. So again, there is a limited amount of time to take these decisions because the packages and everything is on the move. So you cannot just take too much time negotiating or deciding who does what. Again, current solutions are centralized. They are not reactive. They don't allow negotiation. So normally a company would do the organization the night before, and then during the day, all these packages will need to wait until the organization on the subsequent day. So the solutions are not reactive enough. They don't allow for negotiation. This is another area where agreements made on the fly and changing agreements between the drivers could be very beneficial for these companies. This is another example we have been working in the last years. It's quite an imperialistic example. It's called diplomacy. I don't know whether you know it. Some of you have played it, perhaps. Oh my God, a lot of people here. A bunch of freaks. Okay, then. Well, those that have played know it, but for those that have never played, the idea is that there are a number of powers in Europe. I think there are 7 powers. And basically what you do is you play one of these powers and you have some units that are placed on these territories that you see on the map. And to make it very simple, the idea is that you would attack certain territories with your units, or you would support others doing their attacks. But the good thing, there are no chance moves, there are no dices that are here. So the only thing is that if I attack another territory and this guy is there, sitting there waiting for me, then he will not win. So the only way in which someone can win is because it has the support of others. I'm simplifying the thing very much. And how do you get the support? So you get the support by negotiating with the others. So you talk to a guy next to you and say, why don't you support me in this attack? Then I will do whatever you want in that other territory that you're interested in. So people do their negotiations in a hidden way. You can talk to each other of the players, you go for a coffee. Usually this is played in kind of rounds. And you have a few minutes to do these negotiations, and then you play. And playing means that you write your orders, the orders to your units on a piece of paper. And then when you collect all these orders, and there is an algorithm that determines who wins and which are the movements. And the good thing is that I may have negotiated something, but then when I write my orders, the orders are public. Everybody knows what has happened. And in particular, everybody that you have betrayed knows that you have betrayed him, okay? So that opens a very interesting game in which basically you need to cooperate with the others, but at some point you need to betray the others. So it's a complicated psychological game you have to play. Someone can get very upset and then fight you after one such betrayal. Okay, it's from 1954. Many people in the diplomatic forces have been using it to train in negotiation. It's quite an interesting game. The problem here is that this game is the amount of states is 10 to the 100. So no solution by number crunching can get you there. So you need some intelligence in the negotiation process. No need to say in the previous examples the number of possible deals is also astronomical. This is an interesting approach. Okay. All these problems have, I'm taking too much in this negotiation bit as usual. So the problems that I just mentioned have a number of characteristics that make them particularly challenging. The first one is that they are resource negotiation problems. So people have resources that they can exchange. You can have units, you can have packages, you can have slots but you have resources that you need to exchange. It is competitive because in all of them, I mean, somehow every teacher wants their benefit or every track wants their benefit. And the same in the game. And you have repeated interactions. So, I mean, the teachers will meet again, the truck drivers will meet again, and the players will meet again. So you will repeat the interactions. They can be multi-bilateral. So it's two guys talking, but many pairings of two guys talking. Multilateral, like it could be, for instance, in any of those examples, but in particular in diplomacy. Diplomacy, you could sit down 3 of you and decide a common strategy to eliminate the Germans, okay? for instance, or the Italians. So I mean, I have nothing against any particular. Okay. So agents control several resources, and basically they have the power to act on their resources, and they negotiate about those actions. This is the main thing. And interacting involves acting and negotiating. So you negotiate who does something, and then you act. So this is, again, what I wanted to say at the beginning in software, that computing should probably move into this two-phase process in which, on the one hand, you negotiate what to do, software components, humans and software, humans and humans, you decide what to do, and then you act. And then from those actions, you learn from the future decisions on negotiation and for the future action that you're going to make. And another very important thing is time matters. In negotiation, this is a fundamental thing, and there are plenty of examples about that. I mean, when the Israelis and the Palestinians negotiate, they put a limit. We have to negotiate up to this point. Typical examples that are given when the Vietnamese started negotiations with the Americans in Paris. The first thing they did is they rented a palace for 2 years. That put the Americans into a very nervous situation because, I mean, they wanted to finish the negotiations very quickly, and it was obvious that the Vietnamese didn't have the same intention. Okay, these problems, moreover, are very complex because utility is highly nonlinear. So the thing is it's difficult to calculate the utility. It's not something like I have for a variable, I have a very simple function for each variable, and then I can make a linear combination of them. It's much more complex than that. And in many cases, these functions are one way. So I compute the utility of a particular state, I get a value, but I have no way to go from a value to a state. So it's like when you have coffee and milk. Once you mixing them is very easy, but going backwards is impossible. Okay? Solutions may involve a very large number of agents, possibly including humans. So this is also part of the very challenging thing. I mean, in teachers, you can have 50 teachers in a school. In tracks, you can have a large number of tracks. You have seven agents playing in diplomacy. Some of them may be humans, and humans, as we know, are not necessarily rational in their behavior. So the outcome is very difficult. So game theory can be useful up to a certain extent because rationality cannot be assumed. So the space of solutions is huge. That's another thing. I said 10 to 100 in the case of diplomacy. So there is no possibility to exhaustively explore the solutions. The environment changes during the negotiations due to the actions of others. I mean, if I'm discussing with you about swapping to slots, then you might have, or before we go to the headmaster, you may discuss with someone else. I discuss with someone else. So in the end, things may happen in the environment, may avoid some of your solutions to take place. So you need to do things in a reasonable high pace. Okay. Other guys in the system may be unknown. You cannot trust them, so you may reach an agreement with them and they will not honor that agreement. And the time frame is limiting your decisions. Okay. So there is competition from other agents. We need to make deals before competitors do. And we have a dilemma. We have a trade-off here. The question is, do I search long enough to find the best possible deal? Sometimes the best possible deal cannot be reached because the space is too large. But do I search long enough to find better deals? Or I don't search too long because deals might become impossible. So this is the dilemma because there are many people negotiating around you. It's the same with a house. I mean, don't buy too soon. You may find a better one, but if you wait too long, the house you wanted may have gone. So you need to solve this dilemma somehow. So what we propose, and I will not go into the details of this, is with a PhD student like you, I made a proposal which was we call it negotiation branch and bound. It was using basically branch and bound methods that had these properties. It searched for near optimal solutions, but not necessarily optimal. It was an anytime algorithm, so it had reasonable solutions at any time. And this is something in negotiation that is very important. I mean, you need to compute deals. You need to have proposals ready at any moment in order to suggest the others and compare with what the others are suggesting to me. So it combines search for solutions with negotiation. I start searching for solutions. I explore the board and try to find what could be and at the same time I'm negotiating, because I cannot stop negotiating because the good deals may go. So I have to do both things at the same time. Okay, so this was the first time, to our knowledge, that mixed negotiation and search. We did a test in a variant of the traveling salesman problem. I guess all of you know the traveling salesman problem. So what we made was a negotiating traveling salesman problem. And the idea here was that you had the usual stuff, salesmen, cities, and each city had to be visited once by one salesman. And the salesman wanted to minimize the, oh my God, I'm just talking about one of them. I mean, this is ridiculous. Each salesman wants to minimize the length of its own path, and they can negotiate which cities to swap. That's the basic thing. I have a set of cities, you have a set of cities, and to make the simulation meaningful, I mean, some of the cities you could not negotiate upon them, but the others you could. And the idea would be to exchange cities. So initially, imagine you could have this kind of assignment of cities that would make the traveling of each one not very good. But after negotiation, you could swap cities among them so that the overall negotiation is better. When I say the overall, such a thing doesn't exist. Each traveling salesman will negotiate on his own. If someone is sleeping and doesn't negotiate, he will get a bad deal at the end, a bad solution at the end. Those that are fast and good in finding possible changes and allowing for those changes will be better off in the end. Okay, so we did some experiments that basically shows, and I will just stop this talk. Basically, if you increase the time length, if you give more time to the agents doing the negotiation, you improve the solutions, which is something you would expect. If you increase the problem size, which means the number of agents or the number of cities, things stay quite well, which is interesting. Adding the number of agents explains that there are more agents exploring, more agents doing search, and therefore more possibilities for good deals to be found. And the number of cities decreases slowly the quality of the solutions, but not that much. So very funny, I'm not giving you these examples here, but we found also something very interesting. So if you have an intelligent agent doing these negotiations and a dumb agent that doesn't know how to negotiate, never mind, the dumb agents do better. Why? Because the search is done by the intelligent agents. So the intelligent agents are proposing them good deals and they're saying, oh yes, this is good. They don't know how to find them, but they improve. Of course, there is a limit. So when you have too many dumb agents, the thing collapses. But I mean, to a large deal, I mean, in society that happens as well. I mean, you may have dumb agents that can survive because the others are kind of doing the right thing. So it's quite interesting to realize that also in this problem. Well, we also did, sometimes there is a question from the audience saying, well, yeah, but what is the optimum? Yeah, the optimum is very difficult to define because the optimum for whom? So, I mean, there is nothing that you could define as a social optimum here because, I mean, every agent wants to do the best for them. And even because you need to negotiate and search at the same time, even yourself, you can just stop getting the best solution because you want to negotiate and you close deals, agreements, and later on you may find something better, but you already locked an agreement that you have to honor. Okay, so this pressure of time makes you that optimum perhaps are not the best. It's not a concept that makes sense here. So in this one, we took a number of agents, a number of cities that were far from each other, and basically like clusters of cities. So it was a kind of an optimal for it. You send a person to each one of the clusters, so this is kind of an optimal solution. But then what you do is you take cities and then you swap them. So you degrade quickly the solution. So the thing would be whether the agents would find the proper swaps to go back to the initial solution. And to a large extent, they do. So they find, using this algorithm, the initial solution. Okay, now we are applying it to diplomacy is getting more complicated than we expected, as you can imagine. And we're hopefully getting good results in a couple of months. Okay. So that's for negotiation. It's one of the basics. I just gave you a few ideas about negotiation. As I said, you can read tons of papers on the problem. Okay. I think I will go to the video. I hope you will listen. Can we connect? That will be a problem for you. For the
Our project is called ACE, which is about using intelligent computer agents to try and enhance online cultural experiences for everyone. The idea with using intelligent personal agents is that they can act on our behalf kind of automatically because they have a model of our desires and our beliefs and things like our intentions and opinions. So we take advantage of those in our project. And we've got a kind of novel computer architecture which allows these agents to communicate and negotiate on behalf of their human users to encourage a stronger sense of what we call a shared experience during online visits to cultural institutions such as archives, museums, and galleries. And kind of projects inspired by the fact that many are very highly motivated to want to share our experiences with others. Most of us prefer to visit sporting events, concerts, gameplays, even shopping with others. But sometimes it's not possible for all kinds of reasons, which could be social reasons, could be physical reasons. So we want to know whether we can create a sense of shared experience in an online context. In December 2012, we produced a prototype that we called We Curate. The system was specifically designed with the idea that users would share their understanding of digital image, and in real time in order to create an exhibition, a kind of collaborative exhibition. We were lucky enough to be able to evaluate it at one of London's leading museums, called the Horniman Museum, which is known for its anthropology, its collection of musical instruments, natural history collections, and has an acclaimed aquarium and an award-winning garden. And during our time there, museum visitors were able to come and use a set of iPads and share their experiences and views of digital images that belonged to the Horniman archive. They were set the challenge of working together, but on these different devices, which you could imagine could be separated across London or the UK or wherever, to choose a sub-selection of these images for their own curation. So how would they negotiate and work together to work out the exhibition that they felt represented them as a group? So logging into the We Curate system, we could indicate how much they dislike images from the museum's collection. And each step, they were always aware of the judgment of the other participants. That's very important for a sense of collective and shared experience. Next, they were able to add tags to images they liked and able to discuss them using text messages which were shared between them all. They could resize or delete these tags in order to demonstrate their particular preferences. Of course, new tags could be added, and these would be shared with the whole group. And then finally, once everyone had a sense of what the group thought between them, they could vote on whether to keep the image in the collaboratively curated virtual exhibition. So we're currently evaluating the results of this prototype. And how people, use it, might want to use it, in order that we can redesign the system so that it becomes possible that people can visit museums, art galleries and theatres with friends and strangers and have some sense of this shared experience that motivates so many of us. So shared online cultural experience will now be available on the plan within the project through the handheld device, which is in many of our pockets. And of course, you don't necessarily have to be in the gallery. You can be anywhere in the world to do this, and I think that's really important. But of course, in many cases, there's nothing quite like going to galleries and museums by ourselves or with others physically. But often things stop us. So the hope is that through the social, fun experiences allowed by our project, we can break down some of these barriers and so engage just a bit more with our cultural heritage.
Okay, now I can go to the explanations of what you saw there. So the motivation, as you saw, was trying to increase the number of visits to museums, which is a phenomenon that, as you know, I mean, museums are losing people crossing their doors every day. Okay, from our perspective, from the information technologies perspective, we had a number of challenges here that we wanted to achieve. The first one, so we have been working in my institute for a long time in the concept of electronic institution. I will not go into that, it will take too long, but we wanted to develop a peer-to-peer version of that. You have seen all these iPads, so we wanted each one of these iPads or computers to have, I would say, a version of the electronic institution engine and capable of building networks of those engines that would basically on their own execute different applications. One of the applications being the museum example that you saw. We put that into mobile devices, in particular into iPads. It's open source. And this is the bit that I wanted to stress in this particular talk, which is the argumentation-based architecture that we included there, because I think this is related to the agreement problem. Let's see first, the organization. The electronic institution, I said I will not say much about that, but basically contains what we call activities, and these activities, some of you may know about workflow languages, okay, like BPL or BPMN, in which basically what you have is processes, and then you have data that hits into those processes and data that goes out of those processes. Here, differently from those systems, what you have are processes getting into activities, computing together, and then moving into other activities. So it's closer to the notion of ambient calculus. I don't know if you're familiar with ambient calculus, but the idea is that the processes are those that are moving from one activity to another. So in this particular example of the museum, what we had were three activities. One was the initial preference establishment by the participants. So you would see a picture, and each one would just, with your finger, determine how much you like that picture. Okay? So the system will just take one initial decision. So this was a mixed society with humans and agents. If the agents behind the scenes, let's say, see that everybody is very happy with the picture, they will just skip it. That's it. We will not do anything else. But if the preferences of the humans would not kind of agree, everybody would be sent into another activity in which they would kind of negotiate, try to agree, to build an agreement among humans in this case. So the software will kind of mediate in that building of an agreement. What would be the agreement based on? Would be based on the tags, and this is something that will be familiar for you on semantics. So every picture will come from a database and will have tags. So these tags would be those bubbles that you detected there. And basically what you would do is to, by moving, changing the size of the bubbles, that would be the reasons why you like the image. You would say, oh, I like very much that it is a C image, and then you would make it very big. Someone else would say, no, I don't like it, it's a C image. By using tags and also adding new tags to the image by text that would immediately appear to others, so that they could express their opinion on the image using those tags, the system behind would determine whether there is agreement or not. It would automatically compute by aggregating your preferences on the different tags, whether you like it or not. In case there is a lot of disagreement between two guys, it would invite those guys to go to a private room, let's say, try to persuade each other about that. How? In the same way, by adding new tags that people then can persuade the other, or using some text. You always liked, say, images. What happens to you today, okay? So trying to make them change their views on the tags of the images and their preferences. And in case they get convinced, then going back and trying to reach a consensus. If this consensus is reached among everybody, so there is an agreement on whether to keep or not to keep that image in the group's collection, then the thing will finish there. But if there is no possibility of reaching that agreement, then everybody will be moved into a third scene, into a third activity, in which they would vote. So it will be just a voting, and the majority will determine whether that particular image is going to be taken or not. So this is, I put this here because this is an example of how you should build organizations, software, workflows whose objective is the reaching of agreement between humans, and how the software can support that in an easy and declarative way, with some artificial intelligence components behind the scenes to help in the process. Okay? So basically, And in this platform, you specify these activities, you put the arrows with the agents moving among them, and it gets animated immediately. Okay, so this is a summary of what I have just explained. These are images of the thing, and I will not put the video again. This was validated. This is just for you. I mean, tonight I think I will just explain you a few things about how to perform research. And there is a sentence that Ramon y Cajal says always, is that theories may desert you, but data will defend you. So when you do your PhD, I mean, try and collect data, because data is something that you can use, even if the theory has to change. Data is valuable in itself. So validating your prototypes or your systems is an important part of your research. So we installed that in that museum you saw in the video, and there were so people were getting there in groups, and there were there was a person taking notes, questionnaires, and to see whether people liked the system or what happened. So there were many cases where it was families, kind of parent and children, adult children alone. So there was there was some data taken, but there was a lot of, I would say, a scaffolding experience. So the parents teaching the children how to use the system, and so there was a lot of or playful behavior. I mean, people engaged with the balls, and they got interested in adding new tags and commenting on them. So there was a lot of engagement, and for that it helped a lot the kind of interface that we programmed that was very, very good for that. I mean, with these balloons and things. So the validation was quite, I'd say, interesting for us. There were some things that were very funny we didn't expect. I mean, one of the things in this application is that with your finger, because these are images, you could just put in your finger that would zoom in. Okay? And the nice thing is that in order to have a shared experience, everybody else would see your icon at the point where you are zooming in. Okay? So there is a lot of messaging behind between the different participants. So if I zoom in here, everybody sees my icon there. There was a lot of behavior, like when you see someone looking in a particular part, more people go there to see it. So you see this phenomenon of aggregations of interest, which is funny, and also gives you this idea that we managed to get this feeling of shared experience, which is what we wanted, so that you could be in different parts of the planet, but never mind have the feeling that you are doing something together. After we did this project, it's very funny, appeared a company, I don't know whether they're making money or not, because this is a concept of browsing together. There was a company called Co-Browsing. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's a bit crazy. You're on a web page, but it's similar to this idea, much simpler than this idea. But you're on a web page, and the normal thing is that you go with your mouse and you click, and you move to another web page, okay? The thing is that there is not only one arrow on your screen. So it's your arrow and someone else's arrow, your friend, your wife, your husband, okay? And then you go to the link that either you or the other one clicks. So you're navigating together, but the decisions are not just made by you, but they're made by two people or more people, as you can imagine. This is a bit the idea behind this as a collective kind of decision-making process. Okay. I will talk about another example, and I will finish with this one, probably.
Dave is a tutor who wants to generate a new lesson plan for his group of guitar students, Carl, José Luis, Juan, Mark, Anna, Francois, and Luke. Dave starts by opening the lesson plan editor for defining the pedagogical workflow. The goal of this lesson plan is increasing the speech competence and the interpretation maturity of the students. Dave defines the roles of this lesson plan, which in this case are the tutor and student roles. He also defines the sequence of activities, such as uploading songs, mutual assessment, automatic performance analysis, and mark generation. Once the lesson plan is completed and verified by the system, Dave saves it to the public library of lesson plans. Dave launches the lesson plan he has just defined and logs in as a tutor. Right after launching the lesson plan, the interfaces for the students and the tutor are automatically generated by the system, and the lesson plan is ready to be operational. As the tutor, he navigates through the lesson plan, moving into the activity where a score needs to be provided for the students to practice. In this activity, he plays and records the score offline, and when online, he uploads both the score and the audio file. Dave leaves the lesson plan, intending to come back later to monitor what the students have done. Now, students can navigate through the lesson plan, find the assignment, that is the tutor's uploaded score, practice it, assess each other's performances, and so on. Carlos, one of Dave's students, gets home and logs into the lesson plan. He likes the piece proposed by Dave, My Funny Valentine, and decides to try it straight away. Offline, Carlos plays and records the score. Online, he uploads his recording before leaving the browser. Carlos's performance may now be assessed by the system in two different manners. The first is by the feedback of community members, that is, fellow students. The second is by automatic analysis tools, as specified by the lesson plan. The lesson plan editor allows for the integration of web services as part of lesson plan activities. In particular, when defining the lesson plan, Dave has included a service that automatically analyzes students' recordings. The result of this analysis illustrates, in a temporal line, how close is a student's performance to the goal set by the tutor, in this case, Dave's own performance. The higher the line is, the farther the student's performance is from that of the tutor's. Giuseppe Ruiz wants to see how his community has been handling the assignment. He logs back into the system, and he chooses to give his opinion on Carlos's performance by moving into the corresponding activity. Giuseppe Ruiz listens to Carlos's recording. He leaves a comment. And after forming an opinion on how good Carlos's performance is, and as requested by the lesson plan, he provides marks on the speed and maturity levels. Carlos then moves to his own assessment activity to see who has assessed him and what the opinions have been so far. He sees that there are currently 3 other students in the activity, Giuseppe Ruiz, Joan, and Luc. He sees the opinions expressed so far, including that of Francois, that is no longer present in the assessment activity. Carlos will also see a comment arriving from Joan in real time, as both are in the assessment activity at that very moment. Joan also gives his marks. The lesson plan editor allows incorporating agents that proactively take decisions. In this lesson plan, a trust agent was incorporated by Dave to help him with the process of assessing large quantities of students. Whenever possible, the trust agent generates tentative marks for other students by comparing peer assessments to tutors' assessments.
Okay, so this is another example of organizations. I mean, you saw a number of activities. In this case, we use them in the context of lesson plan generation. As you know, in pedagogy, it's very important to determine which are the steps that the students should do, what parts should be individual, which parts should be collective, when students have to talk to teachers and so on. So the same tool that we use for ACE can be used for this kind of lesson plan edition. So we are working on that in the context of music because one-to-one tuition is too expensive. And for certain people that want to learn music, learn them in a community-based context in which others help each other, give you comments, give you new notes to play, and so on, we thought was a good idea. And as we are too late, I will just explain you an application where trust and norms play an important role. Okay, I will just give you the idea. We did that for iPhones. And the idea was, well, you are too young to have kids. Well, not all of you, but I mean most of you. So one of the things that you need to do with your kids to go to school and pick them up and get them home, okay? And this is something you do every day, I don't know, at 5, at 6, depends on the countries, or at 4. Okay, the idea was to take that as an example of a situation in which you may need help. So you're in a meeting, you're late to pick up your child, you have your iPhone, and you press the panic button, I need help to pick up my child. So what we developed were a number of flooding algorithms based on trust. So the idea being that I send that petition for help to those members in my community that I trust enough for that task to be done. And similarly, if they cannot make that help for me, they will forward that to those that they trust enough to do the job, with some multiplying effect here. I mean, there are all the equations that they will not show you in terms of trusting. So the thing is, if someone decides that he can help or she can help, pressing the button on the iPhone would just show me on my iPhone, certain person will take care of your particular task, so you don't need to panic anymore. Or if I don't receive any answer soon enough, or the system just reflats and doesn't get any answer, then you can decrease, for instance, the level of trust. Okay, now I can decrease, instead of the level of trust 0.9, someone with 0.8 can deal with it, and then you can reflat again and look for solutions. Okay, so this is the system. It works quite well. Of course, it can be applied to anything apart from picking up child. But there is one element here that we explored, which is the definition of norms. For instance, the system may work on a notion of reciprocity. And there is a norm that says if you ask for help and some person gives help to you, then you should reciprocate. For instance, every 3 times that she helps you, then you need to help her. Okay? That could be a norm in the system, which means that the system knows that norm, and then when I'm asking for the 4th time, the system will not send that message to that person, because that person already helped you 3 times without you reciprocating. Okay, so what we include in the system is the possibility of discussing and agreeing on those norms, so that the members of the community may say, hey, 3 is too many, I think it should be 2 only, the case in which you do not reciprocate. So you would argue using the same tool, you would decide, you would vote, and that norm will become part of the charter of that community. And by changing that norm, the software internalizes that. And from then on, when it is the 3rd time you need to ask for help to that woman, that would not get to that person, because it's beyond the number 2, that is now the agreement on how many times can you help without receiving a reciprocation. So the relationship between norms and the execution of software is also a challenge element that I think requires a lot of research. So it's not an obvious thing to solve. Anyway, this is a very interesting application. When we show it on the iPhones, people get very interested on that. Sorry, I should stop, yeah?
Yeah,
No. Me to stop?
No. I have a question. So norms can be negotiated on system level, but they could also be negotiated on individual level, so that individual level could override the system.
I completely agree. And that would be more than a norm, because a norm usually has this social dimension. There will be some instructions that you put into the system. Don't bother me with any request from that guy. I hate him, okay? That could be a particular norm that, if you want, but is more a kind of an instruction to your particular device. I agree. Anyway, the term norm usually is used when it is an agreement by a certain community. Okay, so I had a number of equations here that I'm, as you see, skipping and finishing. I think agreements will become increasingly central in software engineering, and you can look into them from the perspective of semantics in essence, but I think you could broaden it up a bit and see that agreements can have more dimensions. In particular for semantics, I think they're key for interoperability. I mean, interoperability is that problem that computer scientists have been fighting for the last 40 years. And So probably semantics has many things to say, and perhaps adding the notion of agreements, certain autonomy in the software that needs to interoperate in order to find the agreements on the semantics may be part of the solution. So negotiation and organizations are key to build mixed societies. I mean, we saw two examples in the project A's and the project Praise, in which we had agents, humans, web services in a mixed society that were negotiating and interacting together. Well, trust models go somehow beyond agreement computing. They are very important. We saw very quickly in the importance in the last two examples, but it goes beyond agreement computing. I mean, trust models is one of these byproducts of this research that can be used in recommender systems, in e-commerce, in many other applications. And there is a high industrial interest on agreement computing in general, in online dispute resolution, how to solve conflicts of people interacting by electronic means, or customer relationship management. So how do you decide which provider you're going to use at every moment? I mean, with whom are you going to negotiate, in which terms, under which conditions? What's the level of trust you have on that? The social networks, I mean, and the relationship between the agreements. We saw the example of these children at school. I mean, the connection between agreement computing and social networks is also clear and of high industrial interest. Okay, so sorry for the bit chaotic presentation, but this is what I wanted to explain you, and if you have questions, I will be very happy to answer them. Yep.
Sorry, I got it first. So, to what extent do you think trust is transitive? To me, it appears that maybe not at all.
Well, that's a good question. Probably it is not transitive depending on the task that you are doing. For instance, for children, and this is actually in this application, we had in the flooding algorithm an element which is the number of hops that you're going to allow. So there are two things. One thing would be whether you could believe that there is a certain transitivity, like if I trust you level 0.7 and Alan trusts you 0.8, then I would trust you 0.56. That could be one understanding, or I can trust you 0.7, the minimum, or the product. There could be different ways of combining that. I may do that for certain things, but not to pick up my child. For instance, to pick up my child, I need to know you. So I only want to use one hop relationships. So there more to it than just the computation of trust. In this particular case, the number of hops. As you know, usually in flooding algorithms of a peer-to-peer network, you have what they call the time to live. So you say, I flood up to level 4 or 5. So and then you finish. Otherwise, you will get kind of you will create problems in the network. But I agree with you. I mean, and my answer would be depends on the task.
Handling disagreement, that not just to the goal to go in the same direction, have an agreement, but knowing that is a disagreement that cannot be solved and split in communities. For instance, in that case, can be have a community of selfless people that don't care about and that.
Actually, the set of norms, I mean, for us, part of the research questions in CIVIT was to understand the evolution of communities. So the thing is, you can create a community, and this is something we want to do because normal social network software these days, the way you interact is the way some guy in California decided that you have to interact. So you have no say in the things you would see there. So what we wanted is to have this normative element as part of the community's charter so that you could negotiate and decide upon it. Okay, what does it mean is that you may be in a community, the norms of that community may shift in a certain direction. You may not be happy with that. Then you can step down of that community and create a new one. So in the end, what you have is an ecosystem of communities, each one of them with the norms that their members kind of prefer to have. So yeah, I mean, that would be the idea. It's like having, instead of one Facebook, to have millions of different Facebook, each one of them working with different rules according to what the guys in that community prefer.
So you spoke about norms. So I don't know whether in your work, wonder whether in your work you find a way to represent norms in a way which is not application specific.
Okay, that's a good question, because everybody has been working on norms in very strange logics, in deontic logics, or in logics with temporal operators. I mean, if you look at the norm there, I mean, my mother-in-law cannot understand that, and I don't mean anything by that, but I mean, it's not something you can give to normal people. I mean, so then I think we need to look for systems and languages that are very, very easy to be understood by people. For me, my model is the if this then that. I don't know if you know this thing. Is do we have internet here or no? Yes. Sometimes engineers have very good ideas. Yeah. Okay, sorry, it's very slow, but so for me this should be the model. And actually, we are trying to define a normative language that goes along this direction, and we are kind of very happy with it. Here is something very silly. You can give norms or instructions of the. So I have one every morning. For instance, it says if time is 10:30, then send an email to me saying go for a coffee. Okay, so the way you write this kind of norms. Oh my God! Email password. No, sign in. Okay, sign in. You will see that the way these guys do, you see, is personal filter. A new one. Create a recipe here. Okay. Okay. You see, if this then that. Basically, you go to the this, and this D basically uses channels. So it can be time, or it can be your Facebook or a Twitter or whatever. When I receive a new Twitter from this guy, then send me an email or make my phone beep. Or so it's kind of production rules, the old production rules, but using all the channels that you have. And of course, you need to give your credentials to this system. You need to give your passwords and everything so they can access your information. I mean, it's up to that. But this is a very simple way of representing production rules. As you see, they have a massive amount of channels that can be used. So answering your question, I think we need to find very simple ways of writing norms. And not only that, and this is an important research question for human-computer interfaces, how to present a norm. How can we represent a norm in a graphical way that people can understand? We are used to traffic norms. When it is round with a red strip around, it means prohibition, okay? And it's very easy when you see that, oh, there is a prohibition here. Which one is a prohibition? But we don't have similar elements or graphical elements for the norms that we would like to have in computing. And this is, again, something to research.
Unfortunately, again, we've run over, but I think this is a very interesting, Carlos' talk was a very interesting transition from kind of looking at semantics and agreement on meaning, but also looking at interaction and action and decision-making, which is another kind of theme of essence and which is very important. So we should thank Carlos again for the lecture.